as ancient drums, we go black and be so bright, flutter here and take my light.
Now time for some interactive fun.
Secret bonus episode. This is a secret bonus episode. Guess what? We're not talking about cake on this one. I'm taking a break from the cake. Like I said in the last episode, a secret bonus episode might pop out, and here it is. Because it is Wednesday, and the last episode came out on Sunday. So this is a secret bonus episode. I'm still Kirk. This is still Dumb Test Late. And like I said, we're taking a break from the cake. The cake and redo, I'm going to come back to it. But like I said on the last episode, I have so many other ideas that are buzzing around in my head that I wanted to get to. And I didn't want to just like keep holding on to them. Because I kept I had one idea. I had a couple ideas, I should say. But then it just kept building in my head of I could do this and I could add this to the story. I could add this. And I kept reading stuff and listening to podcasts, and it just kept inspiring me. I was like, all right, I need to do a side episode. So this is it. Like I said, I have multiple ideas. This is the first one that's really sparked a big interest in my head, and I just had to do. Okay. So I don't have a title for it yet. But the main concept is around insects and bugs. And sorry if that's, content warning for you. I'm talking about insects and bugs. I won't get too graphic. I like insects and bugs, but I won't get too graphic or crazy. So I don't remember where the original idea came from. Maybe I just saw a dead insect or bug or something, and it sparked something in me, and then the imagination just kept compounding and compounding, and I would listen to something randomly and it made me think about the idea again. So it's going to be not essentially a hero villain story, because I don't know if my character will be a hero or a villain quite yet. I'll get more into that as it goes, but my character is going to struggle with being either a hero or a villain, because the way the story goes, they're kind of being pulled in different directions. But that's getting far ahead. That's getting way ahead. Like I said, I don't even have a title yet. It's just the insect/bug story. Okay. So the main thing around this is that the person in this story, the main character, is either going to turn into an insect or be controlled by insects, or, and I'm sorry if this is gross, if this is a content warning, insects will come out of them. It might be a full-on horror. And that leads to all of my references and inspirations that got me to this point. Okay. So the first reference or inspiration, I'll say, I randomly was recommended this old book by Franz Kafka, a classic book called Metamorphosis, or short story, or novella. I've seen it called different things. It's a short story by Franz Kafka called Metamorphosis. I was just recommended it on Amazon Kindle store, and I was like, I'll read it. It's a short story. It took a day to read, but it's literally just about a person named Gregor Samsa, who is a traveling salesman. He's a young guy. He lives at home with his family. I think the book was written in the early 1900s in Germany, where Franz Kafka is from. But this person, Gregor Samsa, in the story, wakes up one day and he's been somehow transformed into a large, they never say exactly what insect he is, but he's been called a beetle. But they say he's been transformed into some treacherous vermin. It kind of reads as either a beetle or a cockroach or something like that. And he's kind of life size. Is not like a tiny version of like an actual size version of a bug, but he's transformed into this bug. And it's a short story, and it does something great with, I guess you could call this a sci-fi story, science fiction, where the writer doesn't really explain the background, doesn't explain the world. You just, as the reader, as the observer, you get dropped into a world, and you, like this character, have to deal with the sci-fi that's going around. And this one, he wakes up from having weird dreams, and he's turned into a bug. And the story goes in a direction that I didn't think it would, where things just happen, and he has to deal with being just one day supporting his whole family, and then waking up and being this large verminous bug. And he kind of turned into like a burden on his family. Like he goes from being the breadwinner for the whole family to a burden because he can't work. He can't do anything. This family doesn't want to see him. He gets locked in a room. He has to suddenly deal with this like sudden transformation. That's why the book is called Metamorphosis. But it's an interesting read. It's a short story. It's an interesting read. That's my first. I'll get more into the story and how it breaks down and what I'm going to, the inspiration I'm going to use for it and all that stuff in my story. But that's like my first inspiration. The next one is on my to watch list, but it's the movie The Fly from the 80s, 86. With, I can't think of his name right now, it's on the tip of my tongue, but it's a famous sci-fi movie from 86 or from the 80s. I could have the year wrong. Where a scientist, and I can't think of his name, is very famous actor. He builds a transporter device. And when he tests it out, he doesn't realize that a fly gets in it somehow. And then the fly's molecules mix with his and he ends up turning into a fly. It's a movie from the 80s. So I was a kid when it came out. I don't remember actually watching it. I'm probably sure from osmosis or seeing a trailer or something about it that I've caught images of it. But then looking that up, I didn't realize that is a remake and there's an original version called The Fly from 1958 that has Vincent Price in it. It's that is a classic horror movie that I didn't know existed and I really do want to watch. So that's on my to watch list, The Fly from the 80s and the original one. Looking at the synopsis, it's kind of course it's different. There's no transporter. It's not really sci-fi. It's more of a horror. Jeff Goldblum. I just looked it up. Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. Yeah. So those are two on my watch list that's going to be part of, because in my story, my character is kind of, I don't 100% know yet what their transformation is going to be. If like in Metamorphosis, they just one day wake up and they're cursed to be a roach or a beetle, or like in The Fly, where a scientist creates a transporter and an accident with a fly turns him into a fly. From The Fly movie, I'm thinking that a magic spell or, that kind of thing will be involved, where my character is trying to do a magic spell or something, but then an insect gets involved and then he becomes cursed in some way. Which leads me to my next reference or inspiration is I was looking up. This is kind of how the path I started on, where I was looking up insect like symbolism or symbols or for ancient gods. There's a lot of stuff with beetles and scarabs and all that stuff, but I was looking for something kind of different, and I randomly came upon the his name was Nurgle. Originally he was a Babylonian god. That's where, his original folklore came from, or beliefs came from. He's a Babylonian god. Oh, the symbol was in Babylonian, it was a fly. That was the symbol for Nurgle, and that's when I first read about him. But also that he's a god for war and kind of plagues. In folklore, he was responsible for the bubonic plague, the Spanish flu. He's also in Percy Jackson, I think. I mean, he's been used in, storytelling and all that, with all these old gods, but I was going to use him as inspiration, him being the god of the death, being god of death and plague, and that my character in the present day is kind of a far, far down descendant of him. And that's what he's struggling. That's what it goes into, the struggling of being a hero or a villain, because he has this pulling to being a villain because he's a descendant of Nurgle, who wanted to destroy the earth through plagues. And then I was thinking that maybe my character is a COVID baby. That plays into it with being a descendant of Nurgle, who, caused all these plagues in history. And then the whole thing with the insect, being controlled by insects or being something with insects. I'll get more into that. My next thing, and this is one of the original ones, was I wanted to see, just like how my character will be a descendant of Nurgle, he will also be a descendant of Medusa from Greek mythology. And I was looking up, and I was like, did Medusa have children? And Medusa did. Medusa had 2 children. One was, I think, Pegasus. I'm mixing up my notes, but also one was named Chrysaor, Chryssaor, who became a villain later in his mythology because he was very upset with kind of being cast away. And he comes up in some forms of Greek mythology and the Percy Jackson story. Chrysaor, he becomes a pirate. He's brother of Pegasus, the son of Poseidon and Medusa. That my character in this story would be a direct descendant of Chrysaor. I think we're going with Chrysaor. And that's another thing, that's him being pulled into being a villain, because Chrysaor had like this chip on the shoulder of he was ignored by the other gods in Greek mythology, so he wanted to become a villain to gain his respect. So that plays on my character's head. It's not totally directed to the whole insect thing, but I was thinking about like the far down backstory of all the things that would lead to my character. My next. Okay, so I did Percy Jackson, Medusa. And more recent, I was thinking it would be also related to Mothman folklore. Because if my character is a descendant of Nurgle, who is the god of kind of these plagues and all this stuff, Mothman, his folklore is that he kind of shows up around or right before horrific events, especially with the bridge collapse in, I think it was West Virginia, or somewhere, that my character also be another descendant of Mothman, that he can see these horrific events happening and he struggled with the whole hero villain thing. Does he do anything to stop it, or whatever he does, a horrific event is going to happen? He's just cursed with knowledge. So that's my other reference or inspiration. My next one was the story of the Van Meter visitor in Iowa, which was a cryptid that showed up in early 1900s in kind of this mining town in Iowa. And it was described as this giant bird-like pterodactyl that could run on all fours, could fly, but had this thing on its head that was kind of a horn, but had a light on it. And the way it's described in the cryptid is that the light would search. But when people saw this, like remembrances of people, the stories of when people came upon this Van Meter visitor, that when they shot it or they tried to shoot at it, it would emit this really foul odor that would knock people out. And that made me think of stink bugs, and that my character could have some form of a stink bug power, that when he's being attacked or when he's being chased or something, he can emit this odor to get away. It's his defense mechanism as he turns into an insect or wherever I lead the story to go. But that was another inspiration, the Van Meter Visitor, which is a good cryptid. So the next one, so I got Nurgle. I did the Metamorphosis book. Medusa. Back to Nurgle. Nurgle struggles with the feeling of hate and gains power during world conflicts and war. He also shows up in modern day comic books of Constantine and Sandman. That leads to my next inspiration, the Constantine comic. First, the Constantine movie, early 2000s with, I can't think of any actor's name right now. Sorry, I'm rambling. But yes, the Constantine movie. Constantine was a comic series and it was a movie in the early 2000s. An amazing movie, but there's a scene in the movie. It's, if you've seen Constantine, you know the story, but there's a scene in the movie where Constantine is being attacked by this demon who's made up of Keanu Reeves. Constantine starring Keanu Reeves. That he's attacked by this demon that's made up of insects. Like his whole body is made up of insects, and I think there's a snake and there's a crab. Because in the scene you see Constantine, he's out in the rain and he's smoking, and he starts coughing. He takes like syrup and he starts coughing. And then you hear somebody next to him say, "Hey, you got a light." And when he looks up, he's being attacked by this demon that's, made up of insects. And that was my first inspiration. I was like, maybe that demon is in some way my character is turning into that, but he's struggling not to. Or that's what he sees himself turning into if he goes down this villain path. And then that led me to buying a bunch of Constantine comics. And it's funny because I've been in 2 comic book stores this week. I went to one today. Phil's, if you're in the neighborhood, check out Phil's Comic, a very nice comic book store. Because Nurgle shows up in one of the Hellblazer Constantine series. So I got a couple of those ones. And also this insect monster, which I don't think shows up in the Constantine comic series or any of them, but I bought a bunch and I'm going to read through them for more inspiration. Because that's the whole thing with demons and hell and all that stuff with Constantine, demons on Earth and everything. Which leads me to my next, sorry if I'm rambling, my next inspiration for this insect story. Speaking of comics, a while ago, I randomly did one of those, trial 30 days unlimited comic subscriptions. I think it was with Amazon or something like that, because it was a DC comic. I knew it was a DC comic because I knew Batman was involved somehow. But there was just one scene, one page that was burned into my mind. And I was like, and then it came back up when I was going through all these inspirations for this insect story, and I'm trying to build it in my head. Calendar Man, this villain from the Batman series that I've never really heard of, but it was this scene burnt in my head. And I could not find the comic for the life of me. Like, I went through all my history of what I read and all this stuff. It wouldn't show up, and I was Googling it, but I knew it was Calendar Man. And I never really read comics, and it's not like Calendar Man shows. I think he shows up on one of the Arkham Asylum games, but he doesn't show up in any of the main movies. He's not a main villain. But it was the scene burned in my head, and I finally found the comic. After all this, it's from and I bought the comic today from Phil's Comic Book Store. If you're in the area, check out Phil's Comics. Batman Rebirth series that came out in 2016 or 2017. And it's Calendar Man. I knew I was right. It was Calendar Man. But the thing I couldn't really Google and find out the truth about, maybe I made this up in my head, but I found it. So Calendar Man is this villain, and this Batman villain who has the ability to molt. And that's where he can rapidly age, but then he can be reborn young. And in this comic, he does something with the spores in the air. So it's supposed to be every spring he does that, but he speeds up time or something like that. But I finally found it. The reason I would use that because that could be a power for my character in this story. Like insects molt and insects go and not hibernation, but they go in the cocoons and they get reborn. Calendar Man. So my character would have this similar molting ability, which led me to buy a bunch of Batman comics today at Phil's Comic. Check out Phil's Comics if you're in the area. But yeah, I think that's all of my inspirations from the insect story. I mean, the themes I'm dealing with here are not just so far. It's not going to be like Ant-Man. Like, he's not just going to be a superhero and he fights evil with the power of ants. It's because the book Metamorphosis is one of the biggest inspirations because it's like a story that's just dropped in. It's like, it's weird because I'll talk more about this as I go along with these episodes for this insect story, just like I did with the cake story. Metamorphosis, the character in the Franz Kafka book Metamorphosis, he wakes up and he turns into an insect. But reading through that short story, you never figure out why. There's no backstory. There's no magic spell. There's no evil. There's no, nothing he has to fight. The story is basically a story about sacrifice. It's about family. It's about love. It's about all these things. It's about disappointment. It's about self-hatred. It's about changing who you are. It's about growing and dying. The fact that he turns into an insect isn't even the big thing of the story. It's the thing that pushes the story, but the theme of the story is bigger than that. So that's what I want to emphasize and bring out in my story. Yes, it may be an insect story, and yes, it may be gross. Maybe my character goes through all these pains, and it may be jump scares and horrors as far as insects goes, but it's a story about growing. It's going to be a story about growing, I should say. I haven't really done it yet. And about changing who you are and accepting faiths and not accepting fates. I want to go along with bigger themes and just drop you into this sci-fi world as a reader and observer where you grow along with the hero or villain. Who knows? But yeah, those are my main references. So all the ones I went over. This is my watch list. So like I read the Metamorphosis short story. I got the comics. I need to get more Percy Jackson. I think I remember there was a Percy Jackson movie. I don't think there was 2 or 3. I can't remember the original ones that came out a couple years ago, but I think there's a new series out. Should be on Disney Plus. I'll check that out. So that's number 1 on my watch list because Nurgle and maybe Medusa gets brought up in there, and there's more references I can build off of. I got my Constantine comics. I want to read through those. My Batman comics. Maybe Calendar Man will pop up more. I got to watch the Fly movie from the 80s, the original one from 1958. Also, I have to watch Joe's Apartment. I think it's from the 90s. A movie where somebody's in a messy apartment and the cockroaches start talking to him, because my character is going to be in a messy apartment that has insects in it. That's going to be kind of part of the story too. Also Candyman, the horror movie, because I know there's bees involved in that, but Candyman came when I was little, and of course I wasn't able to watch it, but I need to be refreshed on that, even though that's like a pure horror movie. I know insects, at least bees are involved in that. Also the movie Blue Beetle. Like, I know my story isn't going to be a superhero movie, but Blue Beetle does look interesting. Also, I wanted to watch The Mummy again because that's, it's a good movie and there's insects involved in it. So that's my watch list so far. My reading list, I really want to find more like Wicca and kind of natural spell books or grimoires that involve like insects. Because I kind of want that to be like, even though how much I want, like I said in the idea earlier, I just want to drop the story in a sci-fi universe, maybe not give too much backstory, and just have the reader live out this world through what the hero or villain is going through. But also that might not be good enough. And if I do want a backstory, if I kind of emulate what happened in The Fly, that this character does something wrong with a spell, I want more information about, like, more references about, spells and natural spells and grimoires and all that stuff. So that's next on my reading list. So yeah, I rambled a lot. Sorry about that. Those are all my references and inspirations. I'll keep going because my mind is going crazy with this one. I'll do an episode again with this one. Hopefully, so my ultimate long-term, well, not long-term, but ultimate goal, or what I would want to do, is have alternating stories. Like the last episode, I'm continuing the cake story. I'm going to do the next episode will be the cake story. But I put that on, I usually record on Sundays and put that on Sunday night. But this is a Wednesday. Maybe during the week I do an alternative story. Maybe I could do shorter episodes with smaller and new inspirations and new things I come up with. Hopefully I can do that, because my episodes for this podcast are usually short. There's no way. Right now I'm at 25 minutes and I'm panicking because I don't want to get at 30 minutes. It's just me talking into a microphone. I can't talk for that long, but hopefully I can keep that up. Hopefully I can keep that up and do the alternating weeks, because my mind is running crazy with this one. And I have other movie show, whatever ideas that I will run wild with in my mind again and have to do another episode. So, like I said, I'm rambling, but you made it this far. Thank you. Hope you hear from me soon. The next one should be cake. We should be talking about cake again. But thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking out with this weirdness with me. For this insect story. Hopefully for the next one, the next insect story, I'll come up with a title and more about the character, whether they're a hero or a villain. But thanks for listening. Catch you on the next one.